Welcome to another episode of InRange. This is the January 2022 Q&A. All these questions are provided by Patreon supporters at the $5 level and above. And of course, very thankful to all of you who support this channel because we have no sponsors, no overlords, no funding, nothing from YouTube, only you the viewer. So let's get going. Michael H. Long drink has become available in the USA. When are you getting a sponsorship? Well, as we know about sponsorship, never. I don't do sponsorships. For those of you that don't know what long drink is a now traditional Finnish canned beverage. Think of it as like beer, but it's gin and grapefruit juice. And it was actually made for the Olympics in Finland. I don't remember what year it was, but Finland, the government was concerned that Finns had a drinking problem. So they wanted to provide a refreshing beverage at the Olympics that would be something that was mildly alcoholic, but not something that you would get sauced on. So, of course, the Finnish answer is you just drink more of it. At any rate, it's become a traditional thing in Finland, these cans of long drink. And they're quite good. I actually like them. Apparently, it's now being distributed in the USA, and I've even seen it myself. So that's kind of interesting. I'm sure it has nothing to do with InRange, but that's still pretty cool. Electrostatic. Second time asking, what semi-auto 5.56 rifle do you think is best for reliably firing a dog's lunch of scavenged rounds from different manufacturers? Well, there's a number of them that should be fine to do that. But I got to be honest, this is an instance in which the first one that comes to mind is an AK. AKs tend to be, one of their qualities tend to be that they are pretty tolerant of poorly manufactured ammunition. So, although I would put my What Would Stoner Do carbine into a dog's lunch test, and I don't think we'd see a problem there either. In fact, maybe that's a video I should do. But my first instinct would be an AK, and I know that people get weird about 5.56 AKs, but I don't think they should. There's no reason not to have a 5.56 AK. Some of the benefits of 7.60 by 39 and 5.45 by 39 is the taper of the case makes it arguably more reliable for extraction, especially in bad situations. But there is absolutely nothing wrong with a properly gassed 5.56 AK. So my first guess would be an AK. Max J. What is your favorite firearm purely for fun plinking? Well, you're kind of seeing two of them here on the table. These are Schofields. There's going to be a video about this. This one is actual Smith & Wesson, and this one's a New Birdie. Interesting things to talk about between both of these, but pretty much everything Old West and black powder is what I enjoy plinking with. Muzzleloaders to some degree, but like black powder cartridges, cap and ball revolvers, that stuff just, I enjoy it. Civil War carbines, I have a lot of fun just shooting those guns. You use a relatively small amount of ammunition for a really lot of fun and bang for your buck. And of course the fire, the smoke, the boom, that's pretty fun in its own right. So I know that's not one gun, but I would say a category of guns. Erica S. Why did BDC on optics fall out of favor? So BDC is a bullet drop compensator. Normally, I think what you're talking about here, Erica, is a dial on the top that's like 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600. I'm guessing because BDCs really haven't fallen out of favor. We see them on primary arms with their ACSS reticle and other reticles on the market in which it's just graduated into the reticle itself. So you have 50, 100, or 50, 200, 300, 400, something like that. And as long as it's calibrated to the cartridge you're using, you should just be able to hold up and fire. I think dialing in your elevation dope with a BDC has fallen out of favor. One, because very often they don't actually track to the cartridge you're using. It's very rare that it actually works. Like you'll find that 300 is actually 400 and 400 is actually 450 and 500 is actually 6. That kind of stuff is really common. Some of them do, but they usually don't. And the reality is you have to know the distance you're shooting at then and then dial it in. Versus, for example, if it's just etched into the reticle, you could just hold for elevation right on the lines and you're fine. So I don't think BDCs have fallen out of favor. I think mechanical BDCs as an elevation knob have fallen out of favor because we have found it to be more advantageous to do it just in the reticle itself. And if you want to dial in elevation dope on a precision scope, you don't really want something that kind of sort of is 200 and kind of sort of is 300. You want to know your dope and just dial it in based on minutes. Fly traps and firearms. Hey Carl, in the before times you mentioned a spin-off of Desert Brutality called Mountain Brutality. It was going to be held somewhere in West Virginia. Are there any plans to get that going again? Not only are there plans, we've actually just published it for existing Two Gun Army tier and above supporters on Patreon. If you're not a Two Gun Army supporter or above right now, you cannot sign up for Two Gun Army and then get the discount. It's going to be out there. It went live on the 24th of this month, and everyone at Two Gun Army and above have access with discount to early enroll, and that's one of the benefits of the Two Gun Army and above. A couple weeks from now, we will publish it to the greater Patreon audience with not the same discount, but still early access. And then if it isn't full by then, we will then publish it to the public in general. Airplanes. This didn't used to be a thing out here, and it's really common now. Apparently some airspace thing has changed, and I get a lot of aircraft over my property. At any rate, so let me repeat myself. On 1/24, we released it to the Two Gun Army and above at discount. A couple weeks from now, it'll be released to the entire Patreon group. And then if it isn't full by then, it'll be published to the greater audience, the public. If you want to get in on the Patreon release, which is going to happen in a couple weeks, you could sign up for Patreon today, and you have to be a Patreon before we release it for you to have access to that benefit. Because we had a problem in the past where I would announce it, people would sign up to be a Patreon, sign up for the match, and then quit. That's not the point of a perk for someone who's supporting the channel. So for existing Two Gun Army people, it's up right now. If you haven't seen the post, please check it out. You can get it for a discount. We're talking about May 14th and 15th, and indeed it is in West Virginia, and it's called Woodland Brutality. And then in a couple weeks, if you're an existing Patreon before that's released, you will then have that access. And again, if it's not full, it'll go to the public at large. So it's coming, and we've got some special stuff going on with that as well, including maybe some subgun PCC stuff that you could do, which is really cool. So kind of like at Desert Brutality, we did 3-gun, where you had DMR, carbine, and pistol. At this one, it's going to be 2-gun, or it could be 1-gun with PCC or submachine gun. Should be interesting. Sean C. Could you do a brief comparisons of the pros and cons between an open and tube-style red dot sight? All right, so Sean, what you're talking about here is essentially like an aim point, which is an enclosed unit, or an open emitter, like say like a delta point. This is pretty easy. I don't know what the benefits are for an open unit besides weight and size. So an open emitter unit is exposed as a piece of glass, and then it projects the dot onto it. And of course, that is very susceptible to the environment. Mud, dirt, rain, whatever can get on it can mess it up. A closed tube, properly done, should not be susceptible to the environment. A closed tube is larger and heavier, and an open emitter is smaller and lighter. So really the only benefit of an open emitter red dot is smaller, lighter. Every other benefit goes to the closed tube type system. And if you can get a closed unit, you want it. We see this even with pistols. Most of the pistol red dot sights are open emitter types, but you see the Acro from Aimpoint, for example. Steiner now has got one out there that are closed units that go on the pistol, and the advantages of a closed unit on a pistol are the same as the advantages as a closed unit on a rifle. Couple finished brutalities ago, Rudy Reyes was out shooting with an open emitter on an AR, and it was raining, and it completely obliterated his ability to use the red dot sight. In fact, I think he parred out on the stage as a result of environmental conditions and an open emitter red dot sight. So that's a good warning there. They are only viable in certain types of situations, and certain environments will dictate that really you can't use them effectively. Dandy Echo. People seem to be persistent in the belief that people in the Civil War and Old West performed cylinder swaps to reload the Remington New Model Army revolver. Most people in the audience will think of that as the Remington 1858, even though it's a misnomer. Are you aware of any first-hand accounts of this being a common practice in the 19th century? No, I'm not aware of any first-hand accounts of this being a practice in the 19th century, and I have looked very hard. I've also looked for like accessories or leather or some sort of load-bearing kit that would dictate this as possible. So for example, if people were commonly swapping cylinders in the Remington New Model Army revolver, one would think there would be at least some leather pouches made for belts of the time to put a loaded revolver in, or a loaded cylinder in to pull out for that reloading process. I think somewhere along the line Hollywood realized you could do this and it looked cool. In fact, we've seen this in a few movies, and Hollywood has now become the de facto history versus the real history. The truth is, it isn't all that practical to swap cylinders, although Not impossible. It is possible to do it. I'm not going to say it's not possible. But I am not aware of any first-hand or even second-hand accounts of this ever actually being done in combat or historically speaking. See what I talked about aircraft? Here's another one. Blue Jay, do you carry a pocket knife or a multi-tool? If so, what kind? Normally I do carry just a pocket knife. I don't carry a multi-tool. It's just too bulky. I don't like big stuff in my pockets. I actually don't have it on me right now. Just a simple, very simple reproduction World War II wooden handle flip open knife. Something you might use for fishing or something. I don't like having knives exposed on my belt. I don't like them snapped into my... I don't like having quick open tactical knives on my pockets. I just like having a knife around for utility purposes, not for combat. And that lesson came real hard at my first instance of South NARC ECQC, Extreme Close Quarters Combat Course, in which, for the most part, when you got into a tussle with someone and you were wrestling, you were now having to defend not only the pistol that you had carried somewhere concealed, but you were also having to defend and protect yourself from getting your knife taken away from you if it was obvious and exposed. Bladed weapons in close combat are terrifying, and allowing your attacker to take a knife off of you and use it against you is a real risk. And so having a cool-ass tactical knife hanging off your belt or on your pocket is actually tactically generally unsound. And I don't need to flip open something that looks like it's meant to gut another human being to open a box. I just pull it out of my pocket, flip it open, cut open the box, close it, put it back in my pocket. I feel like that's just a more practical solution for me. Orion Hullinger. Who is Sarah Noir? Been wondering for years. I'm going to address this because this has been going on for years. Sarah Noir is no longer with the project. Sarah Noir hasn't been with the project for years now. In all open disclosure, Sarah was a person I was dating for a couple years, and she was helping out with InRange, and she was doing some filming and some editing here and there, because this is a big job and a big task. And I didn't like putting up someone else's work or help without noting that they were part of the project. So I put her in the credits, because that seemed like the honorable thing to do. That has turned into all sorts of legend and lore and claims of all sorts of horrible things, and people delving into my personal life, which they don't have a right to be delving into, over someone that isn't even in my life anymore. Parted amicably, it just wasn't a thing anymore. She's a good person, and I wish her the best, but she worked on it for a little while and doesn't anymore. And the fact that people use that as justification, not this question's fine, but use that to delve into my personal life, which has nothing to do with the channel, is kind of gross. And perhaps you should be more, not you, Orion, but maybe people doing that should be more concerned about their own personal lives than mine. Benjamin B. What is the lowest acceptable MOA accuracy for a modern combat self-defense rifle? This is an interesting question, because obviously you want your rifle to be as mechanically accurate as possible. The better the mechanical accuracy of the rifle, the more you can be poor with it and still get a good hit. So if you've got a MOA, a 1 MOA rifle, mechanically speaking, and you're a 3 MOA shooter, that's better than being a 3 MOA shooter with a 4 MOA rifle, right? So a really good shooter can leverage a 4 MOA rifle pretty effectively out to reasonable distance. But a 4 MOA shooter with a 4 MOA gun has a bigger problem. For me, I think 4 MOA is the rough number. 4 MOA is pretty bad by modern standards, but a 4 MOA gun, leveraged by myself, and I'm not trying to say I'm the best because I'm not, but a competent shooter, can do really good work. After 4 MOA, you start getting really questionable, because out to 300, you're now talking about a 1 foot span, mechanically speaking, at 300 yards, and 1 foot's about a chest. So you can consider a 4 MOA rifle to be effective to about 300 yards, maybe 4, I mean, realistically. But after that, it becomes real dubious. And of course, a 1 MOA rifle at 300 yards, mechanically speaking, is 3 inches. That's a dramatic difference. So if your wobble is big and your gun's mechanical accuracy is tight, you will be better off. So my gut says, with a competent shooter, 4 MOA. Sean M. Did you see Ian's French taco video? No, I did not. Don't even know what that is. Haven't seen any reference to it besides in my questions. I've seen a number of people in comments and in the Q&A mention this French taco. I don't know what it is, and I didn't see it. Hank. H. Hey, Carl, would you still recommend the Loophole Delta Point Micro? So I really like the Delta Point Micro. It just fits right onto the rear sight assembly or area dovetail of a Glock, and it gives you a really effective red dot sight, more effective than you'd think, with a very small profile that can be easily concealed carried or even put into a UM84 holster, and I really like that. It worked really well for me for quite a while, and then it finished brutality after dunking it in and out of ice water and mud. Eventually the rear lens just fell out. Boop. Now, the actual optics still worked. Speaking of closed open red dot sights, it went from a closed red dot sight to an open red dot sight, but it was still full of gunk. If I cleaned it out, I could still see the red dot, so the emitter still worked. That rear little lens popping out, boop, kind of sucked, but it was also going in and out of warm room, cold room, freezing temperatures, and ice water. So I don't know that I would damn that optic for that, although it shouldn't have happened. I just got a replacement from them. It took a little while, but they sent me free of charge because Loophole does honor their warranty. And I'm going to continue to use it because I really like it. So I guess my answer is yes, I still would recommend it. Just don't dunk it in and out of ice water and mud and expect it to continue to work. Kevin B., which mainstream version of food would you choose if you're limited to one? Olive Garden, Italian, Taco Bell Mexican, or Panda Express Chinese? See, when you say Italian, Mexican, or Chinese, I would say none of these are Italian, Mexican, or Chinese. They are American food in the guise of Italian, Mexican, and Chinese. However, along with your question, if I had to pick one of these, no one's going to be happy with this answer, right? I think Olive Garden gets short shrift. I think its food's actually higher quality than people give it, although I still wouldn't call it Italian. Taco Bell is actually becoming a more quality fast food venue than most, and Panda Express has that delectable American Chinese all high fructose corn syrup flavoring. I'm going to go with the Panda Express. Yeah, just because I tend to like Asian style food very much. Tyler H., what are your initial thoughts on Federal's new caliber 30 Super Carry? My initial thoughts is that it's going to be a cartridge that'll be on the market for a little while and then will never go totally mainstream and will get sidelined just like 327 Magnum and other things that have been the new whiz-bang thing. Functionally speaking, I think it's more interesting to take a very small pistol, think of like a Ruger LCP, and add 30 Super Carry to that than to take something like a P365 or Hellcat and just get 2 more rounds. Frankly, the Hellcat and 365 already have pretty reasonable capacity. Obviously, it's nice to have 2 more rounds, but adding 2 more rounds to a 365 or a Hellcat just isn't all that impressive. But adding more capacity to a very tiny subcompact has some merit. I don't think this is going to be a big thing. Now, there's a lot of hype of it this year at SHOT Show. A lot of people asking about it. Obviously, I'm going to have to get a 30 Super Carry gun somewhere to test it out. But my initial thoughts for me, and I know that I'm not on the norm on this, is meh. Mauser Dude. I just started shooting high power style matches after years of quote action quote shooting, and I found it to be a strange combination of fun, challenge, and zen. Any thoughts on that comment? It's funny because I went the opposite direction. I shot high power for years and got 28 of my 30 points to become a distinguished rifleman, shot in the national matches, have some gold medals from M1 Garand matches and things like that. Doesn't buy you a cup of coffee, but it's cool. And it is a zen environment, and it absolutely is a great place to focus on your fundamentals. If you want fundamentals, high power is a good place to garner fundamentals. And the fundamentals that I garnered at high power still help me today at 2-gun or any other thing that I shoot. It is fun. It can be fun. It is challenging, and it is zen. I will say that when you get to the point of competing for leg points in the national matches, I found it to be less fun and less zen and more frustrating and unpleasant. So just like anything, if you take it too far, it can become not great. I still think it's an amazing sport. I am going to go back to it at some point. I do want to get my last 2 leg points, and I'm glad that you found it to be something for yourself. Frank L. Woodland brutality considerations changing regarding Omicron? No. At this point, Omicron is starting to, through the science and through the data, proving, or hopefully proving to be what people have predicted in virology to be a more virulent, as in more transmissible, but less deadly version of COVID. And one is hoping, and we're starting to see data like this, that the current huge peak we're seeing right now is the burnout, where a mass majority of people are going to get this and hopefully not die from it. And as a result, we might achieve some level of herd immunity now. Now, the data does indicate that people who are vaccinated have less of a chance of having a really catastrophic experience with Omicron. But at the same time, we've also seen now with Delta and before, once we learned, outdoor environments, especially things like woodland brutality and two-gun action challenge, outdoor environments are pretty darn safe in terms of the transmission of both, even Omicron. Mask if you wish, but it's not required. And I don't see a concern for Omicron in an outdoor environment like woodland brutality. So there are no considerations beyond that you should take care of yourself how you see fit if you're planning to attend the match. Carl V. Will you ever formally review the Trijicon TA44 Microacog? So I've had the TA44 Microacog on my What Would Stoner Do rifle now in a number of matches and videos. And I have not done a formal review of it. And I know people have been asking. And yes, I will. I haven't got to it yet. I get to these things when I get to them. I don't know what else to say. It's kind of weird. It's like how the spirit moves me. I'm not trying to be flippant. But at some point I'll be like, today is finally the time to get that done. So it is going to happen, yes. Charlie T. I've read conflicting reports about shooting smokeless 4570 in my trapdoor Springfield. Is a 405 grain smokeless or other loading safe to use in my model 1884? Well, I don't want to give this advice to you and then have you blow up your gun. And obviously putting in some like Corbon death hunting round in a trapdoor rifle is a terrible idea. But a standard, from my experience, a well-maintained... I'm telling you, it's become like an airplane racetrack out here recently. I'm not sure what... That guy's real low, too. Anyways, let me get back to the question. In my experience, that if you have a high quality, meaning a good condition trapdoor Springfield, and you're shooting standard 405 grain smokeless, you're not doing some hot load, you should be fine. The way that action works, and the metallurgy on them is quite strong. I wouldn't put it in an Allen's conversion or something like that, but like an 1884, as you're mentioning, which is kind of the end of the run of those guns. A proper, not super potent 405 grain smokeless load should be fine. And I've done it a lot in my guns without a problem. If you want to load your own, you can do things like Trail Boss or load them a little light. But I've used smokeless in trapdoor Springfields extensively and have never had a problem. But your mileage may vary. Seth H. Have you ever visited any of the major Civil War battlefields in the eastern U.S.? Only one. I've been to Gettysburg. It was long ago. We're talking pre-iPhone, pre-digital camera long ago. I have actual pictures, like physical, what are these things, pictures from Gettysburg. It was very memorable, and I would like to go back. But it's the only one I've been to. Jordan W. Do you have plans to make a trapdoor attempt for the Chaps Black Powder Mad Minute project? Based on your familiarity with the platform, I think it would make for a strong data point. Honestly, Jordan, I don't. I think it's a cool project, and I wish Chap all the luck with this project. I just don't get turned on by the Mad Minute. I think it's a little, in my opinion, it's a little overemphasized, and I just don't find it that interesting. So that's not to say that it isn't interesting. That's not to say that you shouldn't find it interesting. I just don't. So since I don't think I'm gonna. M. Zolicon. What was the most challenging part of taking the What Would Stoner Do rifles from DIY into an actual commercial product? The most challenging part's exactly what we described as why this product wasn't viable in 2017 as a commercial product, which was getting all of the different manufacturers, Faxon and the PDQ lever and all the things, all the components that went into this in one place together in aggregate to be able to manufacture and build the thing. And that's exactly what happened. Each and every one of the manufacturers, the different components, JP springs. You have to go to you have to go to JP for the JP part. You have to go to PDQ guys for the PDQ part. You have to go to the barrel guys for the barrel part, and supply chain, and getting them to actually provide those things as they said they would. Not all of them, some of them. I don't need to mention who. Became quite challenging. And like you'd have all the parts to build a rifle except one piece, and then you'd contact that manufacturer and they would just blow you off. That's been the problem. and as predicted, and I guess we shouldn't be surprised. I find it weird because the What Would Stoner Do project has brought a lot of attention to each and every manufacturer that made components that we used in the gun. Why they wouldn't be like, wow, thank you for the free advertising, but that's not how it worked. And some of them have been more challenging than others. So that's been the most challenging part. Timothy C. Do you listen to Sabaton? And if so, which of their songs is your favorite? I do not listen to Sabaton. I don't even really like Sabaton. Again, if you like Sabaton, I think that's great. They're not for me. My issue with Sabaton, to me, is each and every song is indistinguishable from the last. I mean this. For me, you put in a Sabaton album, I can't tell when the song has changed. It is very formulaic. It is riff, chorus, riff, over and over again. And I just can't tell them apart. I just can't. I'm just not into them. I know a lot of people are. No offense to you that love Sabaton. They're not for me. Eric S. After punking the world with your Spencer, what do you think the biggest problem people have with the spinner? If you didn't see this, I put up a little Instagram clip, and so did Fagan, with a thug life thing at the end, of me spinning the spinner at 50 yards standing with an 1865 Spencer in black powder. I was astonished that I did it, but I did. In fact, I was shooting through the cloud of smoke where it was. I couldn't even see it when I hit it. And it spun. And we are going to do a thing on InRange here. I have asked the Patreons. We put out a thing on Patreon asking Patreons to provide ideas of like fun, cool things to do with the spinner. Like, what gun should I use to use the spinners? What stupid human trick would you like to see us do to spin the spinner? And Russell, Fagan, Sinister Rifleman, and I are going to do like a series once in a while of spinning the spinner with weird things or in weird ways. Or not. I think we'll fail at some of them too. But I think the problem with the spinner isn't the spinner. The problem with the spinner is the same problem that all targets present, but the spinner exemplifies it and makes it harder. The spinner requires accuracy, meaning you need to hit the top and the bottom, or mostly. You can't miss. Missing more than once on the spinner, especially with 9mm, means it's not going to spin. And timing. It's actually an interesting target in that it requires patience, not speed. So you need to be accurate, but also have patience. You need to shoot it when it presents itself, not when it doesn't. And you need to shoot it when it presents itself and hit it when it presents yourself. It's not good enough to shoot when it's properly presenting itself and miss. And it's not good enough to hit it when it's not properly presenting itself. So it's a matter of timing and accuracy. To me, when I hear things like this is not a fair target, which we're hearing some people say, that same problem would exist with a running man target. It's a moving target. Now, it's a unique moving target in that it's one that does not require reset, and we can run it through a match in which people have to, we can just keep it going. A moving target that goes left to right like a running man is very difficult to implement in a match, but a spinner is easy, relatively speaking, and it still presents a similar problem of accuracy and timing. And so as a result, I think patience and accuracy, and like I said, hitting it when it presents itself. Just hitting it, not good enough. Hitting it at the wrong time, not good enough. If you can hit it when it presents itself, you can spin it with surprising equipment, such as a Spencer. More of that to come. Those Patreon recommendations will be on the public channel for people to see, so it'll be a fun thing. Joshua H. Do you consider DASA guns obsolescent compared to modern striker fire offerings, or is it just a matter of preference? You know, all things considered, it is better to have a gun that has a consistent trigger weight press per every pull or press of the trigger that you wish to fire a round. So you fire the first round, it's 4.5 pounds. You fire the second round, it's 4.5 pounds. You fire the 5th, 7th, 10th round, it's 4.5 pounds. The problem with DASA is that the first round is 8 pounds and the second round is 4 pounds. It can be overcome. Training can compensate for this. But all things considered, a DASA gun is harder to use and requires more training than a striker that will have a consistent trigger press per round fired. I don't know that I'd use the word obsolescent, but I do think that it requires more dedication to be very capable with a DASA gun than it would with a striker fired or even just a constant single action like a 1911. Jarrett M. is the VHS2 the least worst bullpup you've handled so far? Everyone on this channel knows, that's been watching for a while, knows that I'm bullish on bullpups, right? So I've pretty much been kind of down on them for a long time. Quite honestly, when Desert Tech was able to fix the MDR, it started changing my mind. The MDR in 5.56 is really a very good bullpup. I still appreciate it and like it very much. It's also very good in 6.5. I still don't like it in 308. Sorry guys, I just don't. But that gun in 6.5 and 5.56 is an excellent bullpup and is extremely reliable, and they put a lot of work into making it as such, and I appreciate that. When I got my hands on the VHS2, now called the Springfield Hellion, dumb name, that one is also, I mean, I've only shot it in one match, and there will be more footage coming of that. But I will say that of all the bullpups now on the market, if I were to recommend a bullpup, and I would say there are two that I think you should look at: the Desert Tech MDR, MDRX, or the Hellion. Both of them bring a little bit different thing to the table, and it's up to you which one you'd prefer. But those are both really good, high-end quality products that work very well and absolutely mitigate most of the issues that come with a bullpup. They don't mitigate all of them. I mean, the Hellion trigger press is not good. The MDR actually has a really good trigger. Being able to clear the chamber and see clear on a Hellion is pretty easy to do. Being able to actually verify empty on a Desert Tech MDR is quite difficult. Malfunction clearing on a Hellion is easier than on an MDR, but an MDR now doesn't really malfunctions very much at all. So if it's a very high fault tolerant gun, highly resistant to fault and malfunction gun, then maybe that's not a concern, right? The MDR is heavier, the Hellion's lighter. The MDR is modular, the Hellion's not as modular, but both of them are really good bullpups. So I would say if someone says, I want to buy a bullpup, I'm getting a bullpup, which one would I get? I mean, I can't really recommend one over the other. I would say look very closely at the Hellion and the MDR, MDRX. Scott E. Now for something completely different. Way back in the day, what caught my eye and piqued my interest in InRange was you wearing a Skinny Puppy shirt. I listened to more Ministry, however I saw Ogre and Jello Biafra sitting in on a few songs with Ministry, and it was an amazing show. So the question is, what other musical influences are from your youth, and how do you think they helped shape who you are today? Well, you've already mentioned Skinny Puppy. Clear go-to, for sure. Others for me that are a big deal to me are Laibach, the NSK, the New Slovenian Art Movement, of Laibach being the musical part of that art movement. You might have seen a Laibach shirt on the show. Laibach is a highly misunderstood band, but they have been really ahead of their time, and frequently things that are ahead of their time are misunderstood, and I think that's one of Laibach's challenges. I like Laibach very much. I always mispronounce it because I don't speak German, but I really love Einstürzende Neubauten. They're fantastic. These are all kind of industrial, experimental stuff. And there was a local band from LA called Babyland, which was true punk industrial. I mean, they had 55-gallon oil drums, metal pipes, buzz saws, a Mac that they were sequencing with. I freaking loved Babyland. Babyland was amazing. They never saw the success they should have, especially in the industrial scene. And if you go Google up Babyland, their music rules. They never saw the success they deserved, and they eventually kind of gave up on it. But they put out quite a few albums, and they're all excellent. Every album's great. So there's a few for you. Laibach, Einstürzende Neubauten, and I know I'm pronouncing it wrong. You don't have to tell me in the comments. Just is what it is. And Babyland. Patrick H. Have you ever seen or experienced yourself a chain fire in a revolver? Did it damage the gun or the shooter? So a chain fire is when you're using a percussion black powder gun, and for whatever reason, more than one chamber detonates at once. Typically, my belief is it doesn't come from the front. It's usually a loose cap comes off and a spark goes from one to the rear, regardless of what the mechanism is. Instead of firing the one chamber aligned with the barrel, you'll get like 5 or 3, 4, 2, or even all 6 go off at once. It's really scary when it happens, and I have experienced a few of them actually. And I even have footage of one. I plan to do a video on this at some point because I was able to catch one on video, and that'll happen eventually. Here's what's interesting though, because you're shooting relatively soft lead and lead ball or lead projectiles, of the ones I've experienced, and I've seen a few too, no one's ever been hurt. The gun's never been damaged, and the shooter's never been harmed. All of it went forward. There might be a little bit of spalling, but even that, and it's never really hurt the frame or anything. With a proper steel frame revolver, that lead ball just kind of smashes, cuts itself into pieces, and goes down range. So it's scary, but I've never seen anything catastrophic happen as a result. I'm not saying it can't and that it hasn't, but the ones I've experienced and seen have always been like a wow, oh wow, everybody's fine, everything's cool. Reload the gun, keep on going. Sven J. Were you ever part of the tracker, sound tracker movement on the Amiga? I sure was. So I used to be an Amiga guy in the old hacker days. I love the Commodore Amiga. It was such a machine that was way ahead of its time. Speaking of things ahead of their time that didn't get the success they deserved, the Amiga computer's one of those things. True multitasking, way early, proper graphic user interface, a good mouse, incredible 16-bit sound, 4,096 colors on the screen when PC still had frickin' CGA or whatever it was. And the sound tracker movement were files that people were either creating or sharing that were like house electronica music that were rendered completely by the computer, which back then sounded amazing. In fact, you could still play sound trackers and tracker mod files today, and a lot of people wouldn't know you weren't playing like some kind of house rave or even an industrial track. So yeah, I was part of that scene. David W. How did your appearance on Behind the Bastards happen, and would you go back for more episodes like a recurring guest? So Behind the Bastards is a podcast that kind of digs into the dark side of history and public figures. They do good work. It's a great podcast. I highly recommend Behind the Bastards. I love it. Really interesting stuff. I've learned a lot from it. Some of it's exposés on modern things. Some of it's historical. It's a mix of both. And after I mentioned Behind the Bastards on something, it might have been a Q&A, a number of people pinged Robert Evans, who runs Behind the Bastards, and he pinged me and he goes, hey, do you want to be on the show? It was simple as that. And I'm like, I absolutely want to be on the show. And I do hope to be on again. In fact, I was just talking to him yesterday about maybe doing another episode. So hopefully, yes, I will be on another episode of Behind the Bastards. Dean Ranged. Disregarding everything else, the best bullpup trigger. I think I answered that. Now, let's talk out of the box, because I'm sure there are third-party things you can install and all sorts of guns that make things better. But out of the box, meaning pull this one out of the box, unmodified, pull this one out of the box, unmodified, blah, 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 blah. The best one is Desert Tech's MDR, hands down. Their bullpup trigger actually doesn't feel like a bullpup trigger. It just doesn't. I mean, is it as good as the best match trigger on an AR? No. But out of the box, it is a good trigger. It is the only bullpup that has a good trigger out of the box. Nick B. This is the last question, guys. Sorry if it's been asked before, but how do you clean the firearms you have subjected to mud tests, and how long does it take? Are the guns ever damaged from residual grit or water? With a pressure hose and my shower and my tub. I will take the gun apart as much as possible, lean it up against a rock, and I have a pressure hose that I fire up and I just hit it and try to get as much of it off and out through that pressure hose. Some of the guns, historically the worst one actually still is the Tavor. That thing was impossible. In fact, the owner had to take it apart more to get more out. But you fill the tub and bloop, and then shake it like you're like gold panning for mud. That helps. Truth is, a 5-minute video on a mud test will sometimes take me an entire day. Go out there, get the mud ready, film it. The cleaning, depending on the gun, some are better than others. But let's say a modern gun, that cleaning could be anywhere between 2 hours to 8 hours or more, or days. It's a giant pain in the ass, quite honestly. As for any of the guns damaged by the grit, no gun has ever been actually damaged. Now, just describe damaged. Has there been any minor like marring to the finish or scratching or something like that? Yes. Has anything ever been damaged as in not functional any further? No, absolutely not. Some of them, though, it's been really hard to get all of the grit out, and they are still gritty for a while. It eventually breaks free and cleans up. But some of these guns were still kind of like crunchy for a while of shooting them before they became less crunchy again. But no permanent damage. Scratches and marring, yeah, a little bit. Permanent damage, no. So guys, I want to thank you all for tuning in to the January 2022 Q&A. Hopefully you found this fun and entertaining. And I want to remind you that all these questions provided by Patreon supporters at the $5 level and above. And once again, InRange, no sponsors, no overlords. No money from YouTube, not YouTube Red, nobody, not Springfield, nobody. Strictly you, the viewer, and thank you for keeping InRange alive. If you'd like to do that, you can find us at patreon.com/InRangeTV. And if you can't, I totally understand. The other thing you can do is, being a proactively demonetized channel, YouTube does not promote this content. If you can share this video with your friends or other videos from InRange with your friends via whatever mechanism you like, via text, Facebook, whatever, pick. Appreciate it, because then you're the organic algorithm defeating the AI algorithm that YouTube is using to deprecate a lot of different types of content on this platform. Thanks for watching.